Before we begin, viewer discretion is strongly advised. The following is for educational and entertainment purposes only. This is the verbatim federal courtroom testimony of the Sean Diddy Combs trial as reported by Inner City Press. There were no cameras, no microphones, no live feed. Yet what happened behind those courtroom doors sent shockwaves through all of Hollywood. Jamie Foxx, the Oscar-winning actor and one of the most beloved entertainers in the world, wasn't there to perform. He was there to testify. And when he did, he broke down, trembling, sobbing, and screaming in front of the jury. Jamie described a night so disturbing, so deeply buried in secrecy, it's no wonder the courtroom fell silent. But what exactly did Jamie Foxx see inside Diddy's mansion? And why are some saying it could bring down one of the most powerful empires in entertainment history? It started like any other day in court. No cameras, no media frenzy, just a room full of legal professionals, a quiet jury, and a few reporters huddled in the gallery. But that calm shattered the moment Jamie Foxx walked in. Everyone expected composure. This was Jamie Foxx, the man who could command a stage, charm an audience, and hold his own in any room. But the man who sat on that witness stand wasn't the confident, larger-than-life figure the public adored. He was trembling, fragile, haunted. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. His voice cracked with each word, until finally, it broke entirely. And then, in front of the stunned jury, Jamie Foxx collapsed into sobs, screaming, trembling, gripping the edge of the witness stand like it was the only thing keeping him upright. One courtroom observer said it was like watching someone exercise a lifetime of silence. What had triggered it? A single question from the prosecutor. "Mr. Foxx, can you tell us what happened the night you visited Mr. Combs' residence?" The moment he tried to answer, the memories overwhelmed him. And that's when the courtroom realized this wasn't acting. There was no script, no performance. This was trauma, real, raw, and unforgettable. According to leaked court notes and sketches, jurors looked visibly disturbed. Some leaned back in their seats, others looked away. Even the judge called for a 5-minute recess to allow Jamie to regain his composure. But what happened during those few minutes? That emotional unraveling would become the turning point of the entire case. Because for the first time, someone from inside Hollywood's elite wasn't just whispering behind closed doors. He was saying it out loud. And if Jamie Foxx, with all his success, power, and recognition, could break down like that on the stand, what exactly had he witnessed? What did he see that left him this broken? That was the question echoing through everyone's mind as Jamie Foxx wiped his face, took a deep breath, and prepared to tell the world what had really happened inside Diddy's mansion. On the surface, it was the kind of friendship that made headlines and drew cameras. Jamie Foxx and Sean Diddy Combs weren't just two stars crossing paths. They were portrayed as brothers in arms. Award shows, yacht parties, luxury retreats. The images were everywhere. Champagne toasts, inside jokes, arm-in-arm photos that made it seem like these two shared a bond rooted in trust, loyalty, and mutual respect. They called it brotherhood, and the world bought it. To the public, Diddy's circle was the inner sanctum of the entertainment industry. Getting invited into that world wasn't just a social flex, it was a symbol. It meant you'd made it. You were part of the elite. Untouchable. And Jamie, being the charismatic, multifaceted star he is, musician, comedian, actor, Oscar winner, fit in perfectly. He wasn't just in the room, he lit it up. But, as Jamie would later reveal under oath, the bond between him and Diddy wasn't built on trust. It was built on image. And that image, Jamie said, was carefully designed, curated to cover up the truth. In court, Jamie looked down, his voice steadying for the first time after his emotional breakdown. He explained how their so-called friendship was less about connection and more about control. "We all wanted to be part of the circle," he said. Diddy's house wasn't just a mansion, it was a kingdom. The deals, the music, the influence, everything flowed through that place. And like most people in Hollywood, Jamie wanted to belong. That's how it works. You keep your head down, you play the game, and you stay invited. But what Jamie didn't realize was that being invited wasn't always a reward. Sometimes it was a test, because behind the designer suits, the A-list guest lists, and the red carpet smiles was something deeply calculated, something that went way beyond parties, private chefs, and poolside networking. According to Jamie, the night he was invited to Diddy's mansion was the night the mask slipped. Everything he thought he knew about Diddy, about that inner circle, about the rules of celebrity power, began to unravel. What he saw behind those doors didn't just change how he viewed his friend, it changed how he viewed the industry. And in that courtroom, looking back on years of fake smiles and forced laughs, Jamie said it plainly. That brotherhood was just a mask, and the night I saw what was really behind it, I stopped feeling like a guest and started feeling like a target. From the outside, it was everything you'd expect from a Diddy event. Music pulsed through the mansion, laughter echoed off marble walls, expensive wine flowed freely. It was luxury in its loudest form, the kind of night most people only see in tabloid spreads or filtered Instagram stories. But as Jamie Foxx recalled under oath, that night didn't feel like a party, at least not for long. At first, it followed the script. Champagne toasts, celebrity banter, Diddy holding court like a king in his castle. Jamie had been to these types of events before, glamorous, surreal, intoxicating in more ways than one. But something was different this time. The energy shifted after midnight. Jamie described being approached by one of Diddy's aides, someone quiet, serious, and clearly not there to mingle. He was told there was a more exclusive space where the real bonding happened. Curious but slightly buzzed, Jamie followed. That's when the real story began. He was led down a private corridor, away from the laughter, away from the music. The further they walked, the quieter it became. The lights dimmed, the atmosphere changed from playful to something calculated. Jamie noticed unfamiliar faces, people who didn't fit the music or Hollywood mold. They weren't artists. They weren't executives. They weren't even guests, really. Many looked anxious, out of place. Some avoided eye contact altogether. "I didn't recognize them," Jamie said, "and they looked like they didn't want to be there." He was told to relax, that Diddy had a surprise planned. Then he was ushered into a soundproofed theater room. The door closed behind him. A video was already queued up. "I was confused," Jamie said. "I didn't know what I was about to see. They just said, 'This is where we bond.'" He sat down. The screen flickered, and then his voice broke again in court. "I still don't know if it was real or staged, but what I felt, that was real." My stomach dropped. He tried to stand. He wanted to leave, but the doors were locked. "They told me to watch," he said. "Told me everyone who's somebody has been through this." What he witnessed in that room was never fully described in detail, but according to Jamie's sworn statement and courtroom whispers, it was dark. It was disturbing, and it wasn't something he could unsee. Whatever played on that screen, whatever twisted reality was shown, it wasn't meant for the faint of heart. It was meant to test loyalty, or maybe to break it. Afterwards, a 5-minute recess was called so Jamie could regain composure. He returned to the stand pale, shaken, eyes still red. But the weight of what he just revealed had already shifted the tone of the entire courtroom. Because if what Jamie said was true, this wasn't just a night gone wrong. This was a ritual, a manufactured experience designed to see how much someone would tolerate and how far they were willing to go to stay in the circle. And Jamie? He wasn't willing to go any further. After Jamie left the mansion that night, things didn't go back to normal. Not even close. At first, there was silence. No follow-up calls, no thanks for coming, just silence. But the silence didn't last. Within days, the phone started ringing. The conversations weren't threatening, not directly, but they didn't feel casual either. They were more like reminders, warnings without teeth. "Stay close. Don't talk. Let's keep this between us." Then came the offer. A formal NDA, non-disclosure agreement, wrapped inside a financial settlement worth 7 figures. The message was simple. Take the money, sign the document, and forget everything. But Jamie refused. He said no. And in that moment, he drew a line between himself and one of the most powerful figures in entertainment. That's when everything changed. At first, it was subtle. Calls stopped being returned. Meetings with producers that were once warm and enthusiastic turned cold. Emails got lost. Deals got delayed, then disappeared. Jamie described it like being erased in slow motion. One day, he was one of Hollywood's most bankable names. The next, it was like people were afraid to even associate with him. Endorsements vanished. A major film project he had spent over a year developing was abruptly dropped. No explanation. Just gone. And the people behind the scenes, agents, studio heads, financiers, stopped answering altogether. It was a freeze out, he told the court. Quiet, but it was real. I knew why. In his testimony, Jamie didn't mince words. I watched careers disappear, he said. People who asked questions just vanished from the conversation. Not dead, just erased. He wasn't just describing his own experience. He was hinting at an entire underground system of pressure and silence, a system that made sure no one spoke up. And if they did, they paid for it. Jamie revealed that over the years, other celebrities had confided in him. People who had also been invited to the mansion, who had seen things, heard things, felt that same wave of fear wash over them. But none of them spoke publicly. Most didn't even tell their closest friends. The risks were too high. "You think I'm the only one?" Jamie asked. "You think I'm brave? I'm not. I'm just tired." The courtroom was reportedly stunned into silence until a gasp echoed from the gallery. Because in that moment, Jamie named names, 3 other well-known entertainers, household names, who had allegedly been at similar gatherings. Their identities were redacted from the official transcript. But according to multiple sources, one was a Grammy-winning rapper, another a beloved late-night host, and the third, a famous actress known for her activism and outspoken personality. They hadn't come forward. Jamie was the first. And the weight of carrying that truth alone, of being the only one willing to break the spell, was etched across his face. Before closing this part of his testimony, Jamie looked out across the courtroom and said something that hit like a gut punch. "We wear smiles, suits, sunglasses, but behind it, a lot of us are broken. Some things you can't unsee." By this point in Jamie's testimony, the courtroom wasn't just quiet. It was tense. You could feel it in the air. Every word felt heavier than the last. Because what he said next didn't just deepen the mystery, it exposed a far more calculated system, one that went beyond dark parties and disturbing videos. It was about control. According to Jamie, what happened that night at Diddy's mansion wasn't an isolated event. It wasn't some twisted one-off or secret kink hidden behind Hollywood's polished mask. It was part of a much larger machine. Jamie described a chilling rumor that he initially dismissed until multiple insiders confirmed it. A hidden surveillance vault, a nerve center buried deep within Diddy's estate. And in it, footage, hours, days, years worth, clips of celebrities, politicians, CEOs, all caught on hidden cameras. Some partying, some engaging in intimate moments they thought were private, some doing things far more disturbing, and almost none of them knew they were being recorded. According to the insiders, a former house manager, 2 security guards who later disappeared from the public eye, the vault contained not just camera feeds, but encrypted drives, locked cabinets, monitors showing real-time views of bedrooms, spas, private lounges. People walked through those rooms thinking they were safe, but they weren't alone. They filmed things they knew no one would want public, Jamie testified. Things you wouldn't even confess to in therapy. And the most chilling part? These weren't just trophies or sick souvenirs. They were currency. Jamie described it as a stockpile of secrets, footage collected for one reason: leverage. The ability to silence, blackmail, or manipulate people in the industry without ever raising a hand. This wasn't just about watching, Jamie said, his voice calm but piercing. It was about owning people, making sure no one ever turned against them. Then came the moment that solidified everything for him and terrified him in equal measure. A few months after his night at the mansion, Jamie received a package at his production office. No return address, just his name written in heavy black marker. Inside was a flash drive. On that drive was grainy footage, distorted, low-res, but unmistakable. It showed Jamie himself, sitting in that theater room, watching the video. There was no audio, no context, just his facial expressions, fear, confusion, disgust, all caught from a hidden angle. The final frame of the video wasn't even of him, it was a black screen. A single phrase appeared in white text: "Just remember." Jamie told the court he stared at that message for over an hour. He didn't sleep that night. "I knew it was a warning," he said. "I was being told, we see you, we own your silence." And it worked. For a while. He stopped asking questions. He distanced himself from anyone who had been there. He buried what he saw, not because he wanted to, but because he felt like he had no choice. Every time a scandal broke in the news, every time a celebrity suddenly disappeared from the spotlight or issued a strange, carefully worded statement, Jamie wondered, were they filmed too? He believed this hidden archive had already been used to shut down lawsuits, silence victims, even force public statements from people who, in private, had cut ties with Diddy entirely. Some of the most vocal defenders, Jamie claimed, weren't defending Diddy because they liked him. They were doing it because they were afraid. They don't want their footage to surface, he said. They're not loyal. They're trapped. Then he dropped a detail that sent murmurs through the gallery. He spoke about a late-night phone call he received from a woman, someone America knew as a sweetheart, A-list actress, loved, respected. She was crying, panicked. She had received a video of herself, unconscious. A figure hovered over her, someone she didn't recognize. She didn't know if anything happened, Jamie told the court. She didn't know if she'd been violated. She didn't even know who to trust. She begged Jamie for advice, but he didn't know what to say, because in that moment, he realized the full scope of it all. The parties weren't just about pleasure or even manipulation. They were about documenting compromise. And once you were documented, once that footage existed, your silence wasn't requested, it was guaranteed, or else. They don't just collect secrets, Jamie said. They manufacture silence. They build a cage out of your worst moments, and then they hold the key. At this point, Jamie Foxx had already been pushed to the edge. He'd been offered hush money. He'd been ghosted by Hollywood insiders. He'd seen his career slowly stripped away, not through scandal, but through silence. But what came next would confirm everything he feared and expose just how far the reach of this empire extended. It happened on a quiet evening in Los Angeles. Jamie was outside a restaurant. Nothing unusual, just another night out, until two men in dark suits approached him on the sidewalk. They didn't introduce themselves. They didn't flash badges. They weren't trying to rob him. They looked like security or private muscle. Calm, serious, trained to avoid attention. One of them held out a phone. "He wants to talk." Jamie hesitated, then took the phone. And that's when he heard a voice he recognized instantly. Calm, confident, too smooth for the situation. It was Diddy. "I hope you're not planning on saying anything you'll regret, my man," Diddy reportedly said. Jamie didn't speak. He didn't need to. The message was clear. "That kind of thing," Diddy continued, "it can mess up legacies. You're a legend, Jamie. Don't lose that over something that isn't your business." There were no raised voices, no direct threats, but Jamie described it as the most terrifying phone call of his life. Because it wasn't just about what was said, it was about what was implied. Diddy knew where he was, who he was with, what he was considering. The call ended. The men took the phone and walked away without another word. But the damage was done. Jamie told the court he immediately changed his number, canceled public appearances, began moving with private security. He no longer felt like a public figure. He felt like a target. And just days after that eerie call, a story hit a major gossip outlet. The headline, a fabricated scandal accusing Jamie of inappropriate behavior on a past film set. It didn't gain much traction, because it wasn't true, but that wasn't the point. It was a warning shot, Jamie said. It was like he was telling me, we can build a lie around you just as fast as we can destroy you with the truth. And that line stuck, because Jamie realized this wasn't just about keeping people silent. It was about engineering obedience, creating just enough fear to make people fall in line. He described how this tactic wasn't new. It was standard. Celebrities would get messy tabloid leaks at just the right time, smear campaigns, quiet lawsuits, whispered rumors. And just like that, the focus would shift from the powerful figure to the one trying to speak out. But the call wasn't the only thing that rattled Jamie. He also spoke in court about the parties, how guests were forced to hand over their phones at the door. On the surface, it seemed normal. A-list events always want privacy. No one wants leaked selfies or rogue video clips, but Jamie believed something much darker was happening. According to sources close to the mansion, those phones weren't just locked away. They were cloned. Text messages, contacts, photos, voicemails, all copied, stored, and archived. Digital fingerprints from some of the most powerful names in entertainment. People think the danger was in what happened at those parties, Jamie told the court. But the real danger was in what they took from you. Your data, your voice, your fear. Because once they had that, they didn't need to threaten you anymore. They could manipulate you from the shadows, using your own information against you, turning your digital life into a weapon. And that's when Jamie knew. This wasn't a celebrity scandal. This wasn't some PR disaster waiting to blow over. It was systemic. It was about surveillance, silence, and total calculated control. If everything Jamie had said so far painted a picture of manipulation, secrecy, and surveillance, what came next felt like a descent into something darker, more ritualistic, more orchestrated. He wasn't just describing a mansion anymore, he was describing a machine. During his overnight stay at Diddy's estate, Jamie was told his guest room would be in a different wing, separate from the others. At first, he didn't think much of it. Celebrities often get special accommodations, privacy, exclusivity. It's the norm. But the moment he walked in, the room didn't feel like a suite. It felt like a trap. The windows were blacked out. The temperature was unnaturally cold. And in each upper corner of the room, he saw cameras. Visible, unblinking, as if they wanted him to know he was being watched. "I didn't feel like a guest," Jamie said in court. "I felt like a suspect, like I was under interrogation." He tried to sleep, but around 2 a.m., something woke him up. Faint music, laughter, echoes in the hall, drifting in like a distant signal. He opened the door and peered into the hallway. What he saw didn't make sense. A procession of individuals, dressed in robes, walking slowly toward the theater room. Some blindfolded, some holding drinks, all strangely quiet, as if rehearsed. He followed at a distance, careful not to be seen. And when he reached the doorway, what he saw stunned him. Inside the room, the atmosphere had transformed. There were cameras positioned throughout the space, but not in plain sight. They were hidden in corners, tucked behind lighting fixtures, embedded in decorative pieces. At the center of the room stood Diddy, calm, smiling, guiding the event like a director on a film set. It wasn't a party anymore, it was something else. Guests were being offered drinks, some were recorded, some were blindfolded and led into private rooms. Others stood silently, almost in a trance, as music pulsed low beneath the surface. But what struck Jamie most was the presence of men he'd never seen before. They weren't celebrities, they weren't producers or staff. They were handlers, men dressed in black, not drinking, not laughing, not talking. They moved from person to person, checking positions, whispering instructions, ensuring that every angle, every action was being documented. They weren't there to party, Jamie said. They were there to collect footage. Footage for what? Jamie couldn't say, but the word he used was chilling. Leverage. When it ended, he returned to his room, shaken, confused, unsure if what he saw was even real. But when he stepped inside, he realized something was off. The door had been left slightly ajar. Nothing had been taken, nothing disturbed, except one thing. On the nightstand was a framed photo. Him and Diddy, smiling at some award show years prior. It hadn't been there before. Jamie picked it up, turned it over. On the back, written in bold, careful handwriting, brotherhood. That word echoed in his mind, because it wasn't a gesture of friendship. Not anymore. It felt like a message, a reminder, an ownership claim, a warning cloaked in nostalgia. Jamie told the court it was that moment, more than the videos, more than the threats, that rattled him to his core. Because now it was clear, this wasn't a one-off experience. This wasn't a mistake. This was a process. And he had just become part of it, whether he wanted to or not. By now, Jamie Foxx had painted a picture of something much darker than celebrity misconduct. The mood in the courtroom had shifted from shock to dread. But what he said next made it clear. This wasn't just about a single man or even a circle of celebrities. This was about protection at the highest levels. Jamie testified that months after the night at Diddy's mansion, long after the threats and smear stories had begun, he was contacted, not by a reporter or a lawyer, but by someone much more unexpected, an FBI agent. Unofficially, this agent didn't want to be named. He didn't come through legal channels. He reached out quietly, almost nervously. Jamie said the meeting was brief, off the record, and terrifying, because what the agent revealed confirmed all of Jamie's worst fears. According to the agent, the FBI had been investigating Diddy for years, not just for parties, not just for NDAS, but for trafficking, extortion, misconduct, and blackmail. Allegations buried beneath sealed documents and legal roadblocks. Over 30 sealed complaints existed, the agent said. 30, each one packed with disturbing claims, each one submitted by individuals, staff, associates, even guests, who had tried to speak up, but none of them ever made it past a grand jury. Why? He's protected, the agent reportedly said, by people in places you wouldn't believe. It wasn't just about money or celebrity anymore. It was about the kind of protection that bends the system, that makes charges disappear, that keeps cases buried before the public ever sees a headline. And then, Jamie dropped the bombshell. He testified that during the same conversation, the FBI agent told him about sealed documents implicating a former US president in Diddy's inner circle, not directly accused of a crime, but named as having attended at least one of Diddy's exclusive invite-only fundraisers, the kind of event that, according to the investigation, was recorded discreetly, without consent, and archived. Jamie made it clear he didn't know what went on that night. He didn't know if the president was involved in anything illegal, but the implication was enough. Because in a world where the most powerful people fear exposure more than indictment, being caught on tape, in any context, is a weapon. And if someone like Diddy had those kinds of tapes, it would explain a lot. Why investigations vanished, why lawsuits stalled, why accusers backed down at the last second, why no one, not even the FBI, had been able to make anything stick. Jamie described the moment the agent looked him in the eye and said, "If you go public, you won't just be going up against Diddy, you'll be going up against the whole machine." A machine built to protect itself, a machine that crushes whistleblowers, a machine so deeply embedded in the entertainment, political, and financial systems that even truth becomes irrelevant once you threaten it. Jamie's voice cracked as he recalled that final warning. He knew the risks. He knew what had happened to others who tried. But that's when he made a decision. He wasn't speaking out for revenge. He was speaking out because the silence had become unbearable. Because watching more people get hurt, watching more careers vanish, and knowing the truth behind it all, that was something he could no longer carry. "This isn't about revenge," he said, tears in his eyes. "It's about stopping something that's been hidden for too long. This is bigger than music, bigger than me. And if something happens to me after this..." He paused, then looked directly at the jury. "I want the world to know I told the truth." If Jamie Foxx's testimony hadn't already felt like a script torn from a psychological thriller, what he described next sealed it. He called it the blackout, and it wasn't metaphorical. It happened in the middle of the night, long after the main party had ended. Jamie had returned to his guest room, the cold, camera-ridden suite tucked in a far corner of the estate, but he hadn't been able to sleep. There was too much noise in his head, too many unanswered questions about what he'd seen. But around 2 a.m., the noise changed. Suddenly, the music stopped. Abruptly, the hallway lights flickered, once, twice, and then everything plunged into silence. Total blackout. At first, Jamie thought it was just a power outage. It happens, even in multi-million-dollar mansions. But something about the timing felt off. The air grew colder, not from the air conditioning, from something else. A tension settled over the entire house. Thick, heavy, oppressive. Like a storm had entered the building but hadn't brought wind or rain. Just dread. Jamie stepped into the hallway, and what he saw was surreal. Guests had frozen in place. No one was laughing, no one was speaking. It was like they'd rehearsed this moment, like they knew exactly what to do. Everyone just stopped. Then, from one of the side rooms, a tall man in a tailored black suit emerged. Too serious for a party, too calm for the situation. He looked at the few guests still in the hallway and said only one thing. "No phones, no cameras, everyone back inside." Jamie stood frozen. The man didn't raise his voice, didn't repeat himself, but the message was clear. This wasn't a drill, this was protocol. Still shaken, Jamie obeyed. At first. He returned to his room, heart racing, mind spinning, but something told him to look. So he left the room, barefoot, silent, and crept down the hallway. He found a cracked door, barely open, and peered inside. What he saw through that narrow opening, he would never forget. The room was dimly lit. The shadows moved in ways that didn't make sense. There were figures standing in a circle around what looked like someone being restrained. Someone male. Muffled cries echoed. Not screams exactly, but close. Jamie couldn't identify the man being held, but the scene was not a prank, not a party game, and definitely not consensual. It was calculated. A woman walked slowly through the room, calm and detached. She held a small notepad and occasionally scribbled something down, as if she were keeping inventory, cataloging trauma like data. Then she looked up and locked eyes with Jamie through the crack in the door. She didn't scream. She didn't flinch. She didn't alert the others. She simply smiled and shut the door in his face. Jamie stumbled back, breath caught in his throat. He described the moment in court as a psychological collapse, not of his body, but of his belief that this world still made sense. "That's when I knew," he told the jury. "This wasn't a home. This wasn't a party. This was a theater, a stage where people were made into props. Nothing that night was an accident. The robes, the rituals, the handlers, the cameras, it was all orchestrated. And the blackout? That wasn't power failure. That was part of the performance. A shift in the script. A moment when masks fell and roles changed. Where guests became pawns. Where silence was no longer requested. It was assumed. If the events of that night hadn't already pushed Jamie Foxx to the edge, what happened next would be the final piece. The part that tied it all together. The part that broke him. At one point during the party, long before the blackout and long before he knew what he'd walked into, Jamie found himself looking for a bathroom. Just a simple detour. Nothing suspicious. But as he wandered down a hallway, away from the crowd, away from the music, he opened a door he wasn't supposed to. What he found wasn't a closet. It wasn't a guest room. It was a staircase. Narrow, steep, dimly lit with red emergency bulbs that hummed faintly, casting long shadows on the walls. And at the top, two people stood whispering. One of them turned, locked eyes with Jamie. "You lost?" the man asked, his voice cold. Not angry, just blank. Empty, controlled. Jamie apologized and turned back, but just before he closed the door, he saw something else. A heavy, black curtain or sheet hanging down across the upper hallway. Behind it, something blinked. Faint white lights. Slow, rhythmic, mechanical. He didn't know what was behind that curtain, but he knew what it represented. The real vault. The real leverage. The good stuff. Not good as in entertaining. Not good as in valuable. "Good like secrets," Jamie said in court. "Good like control." Later, after the trial began, Jamie spoke to a friend who had also been at one of Diddy's private gatherings. Someone who knew more than he ever admitted publicly. Jamie asked him what happened upstairs. The answer chilled him. "That's where the meetings happen," the friend said. "The kind where people give up something to get something." That line stuck in Jamie's mind for years because it confirmed everything he'd suspected. That this wasn't just about hidden cameras or bizarre parties. This was about initiation, about trade-offs, about surrendering something, your privacy, your dignity, your soul, in exchange for power, deals, access. And Jamie had refused. He hadn't walked up those stairs. He hadn't signed the NDA. He hadn't accepted the money. And he hadn't played along. But the price he paid for that choice was heavy. As the courtroom neared the final moments of Jamie's testimony, the prosecutor asked the question everyone was thinking. "Why didn't you come forward earlier?" Jamie paused, looked down, took a breath. Then he said it plainly. "I was scared. Not of cancel culture, not of headlines, not of losing money. He was scared for his life, for his daughter, for his loved ones, for anyone close to him." "You don't understand the reach this man has," he said. "It's not just about music, it's about silence." He explained how people who had tried to speak out before were hit with lawsuits, surveillance, mysterious firings, how careers disappeared overnight, not with a bang, but with a whisper. "They don't need to kill you," he said. "They just erase you." But when the leaks started, when Cassie's legal battle made headlines, When former staffers began anonymously coming forward, Jamie knew his time had come. "If I stayed quiet now," he told the jury, "I'd be complicit." And that's a burden he couldn't carry anymore. Jamie's voice cracked as he delivered the last line of his testimony. "Everyone thinks Hollywood is built on dreams, but the truth is, it's built on secrets. And this man, he collected more secrets than anyone." Then he paused, looked straight ahead, and added, "I just hope speaking mine helps break whatever spell he had on all of us." The judge called for a recess, and as Jamie walked back to his seat, several jurors, some of them hardened professionals used to testimony from violent cases, were seen wiping tears from their eyes. The courtroom didn't erupt in noise. There were no outbursts, just silence. A deep, heavy silence, the kind that doesn't come from disbelief, but from realization. Because Jamie Foxx hadn't just told a story about one man, he had exposed a system. And in that moment, with the world watching from the outside, the glittering illusion of Hollywood cracked just a little deeper. And the truth, it no longer had anywhere to hide. So, what do we take from Jamie Foxx's testimony? This wasn't just about Diddy, it wasn't even just about Hollywood. This was about the cost of silence in a world ruled by secrets, power, and control. A world where cameras don't just record, they trap. Where NDAs are weapons, where friendships are masks, and where saying nothing is safer than telling the truth. Jamie knew the risks, he felt the pressure, he lived the consequences. And still, he chose to speak. Not because he wanted revenge, but because staying quiet meant protecting something he knew was wrong. Now that his testimony is out, the question isn't whether people will believe him. The real question is, who else was there? And who's still too scared to speak?